There's a reason why your family gatherings feel more like a performance than genuine moments of love. Why everyone tries to do the right thing, but there's still tension in the air. Why, after every visit home, you need a full week just to recover emotionally. This isn't about your family being dysfunctional or having issues. In fact, this might be exactly about everyone trying too hard to be the perfect family that society expects. And this way of trying has been passed down from generation to generation, like a secret recipe that no one dares to question. Maybe you're listening to this because you're the one who always tries to keep everyone happy. Maybe you're the person everyone comes to with their problems, but no one asks how you're feeling. Maybe you love your family deeply, but sometimes feel like you're drowning in the responsibility of managing everyone else's emotions. Just stop for a moment. Take a deep breath. You don't have to carry all this weight alone anymore. There's another way, a way that meditation masters discovered thousands of years ago. They understood that true love sometimes means letting go, not holding on tighter. In the next hour, you'll learn how to love your family more freely and how to liberate everyone from the unspoken expectations that are exhausting you all. Picture a family gathering. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's someone's birthday, or just a simple weekend dinner. Everyone's there, everyone's smiling, but there's something in the air that makes you feel tense. Grandma sits there, constantly asking why you're not married yet, or why you haven't gotten that promotion. Not because she's mean, but because she worries, the same kind of worry her mother passed to her, and now she's passing to your mom. Your mom sits there trying to mediate, trying to keep the atmosphere cheerful, but you can see the exhaustion in her eyes. And you sit there feeling like a disappointing child, even though you're a grown adult with your own life. This isn't just family dynamics, or everyone means well. This is something deeper, more ancient. This is how fear, anxiety, and unfulfilled expectations move through generations like an underground river. Do you notice it? How your grandmother's worry about money looks exactly like your mother's worry about safety. How your mother never talks about her feelings exactly like you keep everything inside. How you feel like you have to be perfect to be loved exactly like your sibling is growing up with the same pressure. This is what I call the invisible inheritance. Things pass from generation to generation that no one is conscious of. Stop for a second. Can you feel this in your own family? That sense that there are unspoken rules no one talks about but everyone has to follow? Now here's the important part, and this is what most people never realize. These inheritances aren't anyone's fault. They're not the result of someone not loving enough or having psychological issues. They're the result of good, loving people trying to do their best in the way they knew how, within the circumstances they inherited. Your grandmother's worry about money might be because she lived through scarcity. Your mother not talking about emotions might be because she was taught that good girls stay strong and don't complain. And you feeling like you have to be perfect might be because you saw your mother exhausted and didn't want to add to her burden. This is exactly how karma, not in the mystical sense but in the practical sense, works in families. Karma isn't revenge or punishment. Karma is simply cause and effect. The actions of previous generations create conditions for the next generation. The unhealed fears of grandparents become the anxiety of parents, which becomes our pressure. But this is also the good news. Because if karma is cause and effect, that means we can create new causes. We can be the first generation in our lineage to stop and say, enough. I'm not passing this down anymore. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of this. You could be the first person in your family to break out of this cycle. Ancient Buddhist masters called this breaking the wheel of samsara, breaking the wheel of repetitive suffering. They understood that suffering doesn't just happen to individuals, but it moves through relationships, through generations, creating repeating patterns until someone becomes aware enough to stop. And that someone could be you. But here's what no one tells you about breaking family patterns. What no one tells you about breaking family patterns is that, first, you have to see them clearly. And the clearest way to see them is to look at 3 generations at once, like holding up a mirror that reflects not just your face, but your mother's face, and her mother's face behind her. Let me show you what I mean with a story that might feel uncomfortably familiar. There's Sarah, sitting at her kitchen table, obsessing over her daughter Emma's college applications. She's made spreadsheets, hired tutors, and spent sleepless nights researching every possible scholarship. I just want her to have opportunities I never had, Sarah tells herself. But if you look closer, you'll see Sarah's mother Margaret in the background, quietly suggesting, maybe Emma should consider something more practical, dear. Art is nice, but it doesn't pay the bills. Now zoom out further. Margaret learned this from her own mother, Rose, who lived through the Depression and believed that survival meant never taking risks, never dreaming too big, never trusting that good things could last. Rose passed her survival fears to Margaret, who turned them into practical advice. Margaret passed this practical advice to Sarah, who transformed it into perfectionist control. And now Sarah, in trying to give Emma every opportunity, is actually passing down the same fear, just wrapped in different paper. Emma feels this pressure. She lies awake at night, not because she's excited about her future, but because she's terrified of disappointing everyone. She's already learned the family rule: love is conditional on achievement. She doesn't know this rule exists. It was never spoken out loud, but she feels it in every conversation about grades, every comparison to her cousins, every "we're just proud of you, honey." That somehow feels like it comes with invisible fine print. Can you see your own family in this mirror? 3 generations of the same fear, wearing different costumes. This is what Buddhist teachers call right view, the ability to see things as they actually are, not as we think they should be or as we've been told they are. Right view doesn't judge Rose for being afraid, or Margaret for being practical, or Sarah for being controlling. Right view simply sees the pattern, how one generation's survival mechanism becomes the next generation's emotional prison. But here's where it gets really interesting. There are 4 inheritance patterns that show up in almost every family, and once you learn to recognize them, you'll see them everywhere. The anxiety legacy is probably the most common. It sounds like this: don't get too excited, something bad might happen. Or, don't tell people your good news yet, you might jinx it. Or, always have a backup plan, you can't trust things to work out. This gets passed down as being realistic, but it's actually inherited fear wearing a responsible mask. The grandmother who lived through war teaches her daughter to expect disaster. The daughter teaches her son to never feel too safe. The son grows up, unable to enjoy success because he's always waiting for the other shoe to drop. The emotional silence tradition shows up in families where feelings are treated like dangerous weather. Everyone can sense the storm, but no one talks about it. We don't do drama in this family. There's no point dwelling on things. Just focus on the positive. These families excel at logistics. Who's bringing what to dinner, when to pick up the kids, but they're terrified of emotions. Children in these families learn that love means not being too much, not too sad, not too angry, sometimes not even too happy. They grow up feeling lonely even when surrounded by people who care about them. Does this feel familiar? That sense that your family cares about you but doesn't really know you? The perfectionism trap is inherited from families where love felt conditional on performance. We're so proud of how responsible you are. You're such a good kid. You never give us any trouble. Look how well you're doing compared to. These children learn that their worth depends on being impressive, helpful, or problem-free. They become adults who can't rest, can't make mistakes, and can't ask for help because they're terrified that people will only love them if they're perfect. The control inheritance shows up when previous generations felt powerless, so they taught the next generation that safety comes from managing everything and everyone. I'm just trying to help. I worry about you. Have you thought about? This looks like love, and it often comes from love, but it's actually fear disguised as care. Children in these families learn that being loved means being managed, and loving others means managing them. They grow up either becoming controllers themselves or marrying people who control them, because that's what love feels like. Now, here's the Buddhist perspective that changes everything. None of these patterns are wrong. They're not character flaws or psychological disorders. They're intelligent responses to difficult circumstances that got frozen in time. Rose's anxiety made perfect sense during the Depression. It kept her family alive. Margaret's practicality made perfect sense in her generation. It provided stability. Sarah's perfectionism makes perfect sense to her. It feels like protection. But what made sense for survival in one generation can become suffering for the next generation when circumstances change. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from clinging to what worked in the past, even when it no longer serves us. This is exactly what happens in families. We inherit solutions to problems we no longer have. Take a moment here. Which of these patterns do you recognize in your own family? You might see pieces of all four, or one might jump out at you immediately. The beautiful thing about right view is that once you can see these patterns clearly, without judgment, they begin to lose their power over you. You stop taking them personally. You stop thinking there's something wrong with you or your family. You start seeing them as inherited emotional habits that can be changed. But, and here's the part that's going to blow your mind about family healing. The reason most people stay stuck in these patterns isn't because they don't want to change. It's not because they don't try hard enough. In fact, here's the shocking truth about family patterns. The people trying hardest to break them are often the ones making them stronger. The shocking truth about family patterns is this: the people trying hardest to break them are often the ones making them stronger. And it happens through the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing in the world: love itself. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria grew up with a mother who worried about everything. Every time Maria left the house, her mother would call twice to make sure she arrived safely. Every decision Maria made, her mother had 3 reasons why it might not work out. Maria hated this. She promised herself she would never be that kind of mother. So when Maria had her own daughter, Jessica, she was determined to be different. She would be the cool mom, the supportive mom, the mom who believed in her daughter's dreams. When Jessica wanted to try out for the soccer team, Maria was her biggest cheerleader. When Jessica struggled with math, Maria hired the best tutor. When Jessica got her heart broken by her first boyfriend, Maria was there with ice cream and tissues, ready to listen to every detail. Maria thought she was giving Jessica everything she never had: support, encouragement, belief. And she was. But here's what Maria didn't realize. In her effort to be the opposite of her anxious mother, she had become something else that was just as restrictive. She had become Jessica's emotional manager. Have you ever tried so hard not to be like your parents that you became something equally limiting in a different way? Jessica never learned to comfort herself because Maria was always there to do it. Jessica never learned to solve her own problems because Maria was always there with solutions. Jessica never learned to trust her own judgment because Maria's support felt so good that Jessica became addicted to it. By the time Jessica was in college, She was calling her mother 3 times a day, not because Maria demanded it, but because Jessica couldn't make any decision without her mother's approval. Maria had broken the pattern of anxious control, only to create a new pattern of loving control. The prison had been redecorated, but it was still a prison. This is what happens when we focus on changing the behavior instead of understanding the root. Maria's mother controlled through fear. Maria controlled through love. But both were forms of control. Both came from the belief that other people can't handle their own lives, and both prevented Jessica from developing her own inner strength. The Buddha had a word for this, upadana, which means clinging or grasping. And here's the thing about clinging. It doesn't matter if you're clinging to something good or something bad. The act of clinging itself creates suffering. Think about it. When you hold a butterfly too tightly, what happens? It dies. When you hold your breath too long, what happens? You suffocate. When you hold on to people too tightly, even with the most loving intentions, what happens? They can't fly. Take a breath here. Can you feel where you might be holding too tightly in your own family? Let me show you how this plays out in different ways, because love prison comes in many forms. The helper prison is when someone becomes so good at helping that everyone around them becomes helpless. This is the parent who packs their adult child's lunch, because I'm going to the store anyway. This is the spouse who pays all the bills, because I'm better with money. This is the sibling who always swoops in to solve everyone's problems, because I can't stand to see you struggle. These helpers are genuinely loving people. They get a deep satisfaction from being needed, from making life easier for others. But what they don't realize is that every time they solve someone else's problem, they rob that person of the chance to grow stronger. They create a family dynamic where love equals rescue, where caring means you never let people struggle, where being helpful means being indispensable. Children in these families grow up feeling incompetent even when they're capable, because they've never been allowed to prove to themselves that they can handle hard things. They either become helpers themselves, addicted to being needed, or they become helpless, always looking for someone to rescue them. The protector prison happens when someone becomes so focused on shielding their family from pain that they create an atmosphere of constant vigilance. This is the parent who calls the school every time their child gets a bad grade. This is the spouse who lies to protect their partner from unnecessary worry. This is the family member who never shares bad news because they don't want to burden anyone. These protectors genuinely believe they're showing love by creating a safe bubble. But what they actually create is a family that can't handle reality. Children in these families grow up unprepared for life's inevitable difficulties. When problems do arise, and they always do, these families fall apart because they've never developed the muscles for dealing with hardship together. The perfectionist prison is built by people who show love through excellence. This is the parent whose house is always spotless, whose children are always well dressed, whose holiday celebrations are Pinterest perfect. This is the spouse who never lets anyone see them struggle, who always has it together, who makes everyone else feel like they're not doing enough. These perfectionists aren't trying to make others feel bad. They're trying to show love through their efforts, trying to create beauty, trying to demonstrate how much their family means to them. But what they actually create is a standard that no one can meet. Family members start hiding their imperfections, start feeling like they're not good enough as they are, start believing that love has to be earned through performance. Which of these feels familiar to you? Maybe you recognize yourself in one of these roles, or maybe you recognize someone in your family. The emotional manager prison might be the most common of all. This is when someone becomes responsible for everyone else's feelings. They can read the room instantly, smooth over conflicts before they start, and somehow always know exactly what everyone needs to feel better. They're the family therapist, the peacekeeper, the one everyone comes to with their problems. These emotional managers are incredibly skilled and deeply caring. They genuinely want everyone to be happy and comfortable. But what they create is a family where no one learns to manage their own emotions. Conflicts never get resolved, they just get managed. People never learn to comfort themselves, they become dependent on the emotional manager. And the emotional manager? They burn out from carrying everyone else's feelings while never having space for their own. Here's what's heartbreaking about all of this. Every single one of these patterns starts with genuine love. The helper really does want to make life easier. The protector really is trying to prevent pain. The perfectionist really is trying to create beauty. The emotional manager really does want everyone to be happy. But somewhere along the way, love transformed into control. Care became clinging. Support became suffocation. The ancient Buddhist teachers understood this perfectly. They distinguished between two types of love: metta, which is loving, kindness that wishes for others' happiness, and tanha, which is a thirsting, grasping love that needs to possess and control. Metta loves like the sun. It shines on everyone equally, asking nothing in return, supporting growth without clinging. Tanha loves like quicksand. The harder the other person struggles to be independent, the tighter it holds on. Here's a question that might be uncomfortable. In your family relationships, are you loving like the sun, or are you loving like quicksand? The truth is, most of us do both. We have moments of beautiful, freeing love, and we have moments of anxious, controlling love. The problem isn't that we're bad people. The problem is that no one ever taught us the difference. In fact, our culture actively teaches us that controlling love is good love. We're taught that worry shows care, that managing others shows responsibility, that fixing people shows love. We're taught that if you really love someone, you can't just stand by and watch them struggle. We're taught that good parents, good spouses, good family members are always there to help, always ready to solve, always willing to take on others' burdens. But what if all of that is backwards? What if the deepest form of love is sometimes stepping back and trusting people to handle their own lives? What if real care sometimes looks like allowing struggle? What if true support sometimes means not rescuing? This is where most people get stuck. They recognize that their loving control isn't working, but they're terrified that if they stop controlling, something bad will happen. They're afraid that if they stop helping, people will fail. They're afraid that if they stop protecting, people will get hurt. They're afraid that if they stop managing, everything will fall apart. And you know what? Sometimes people will fail. Sometimes people will get hurt. Sometimes things will fall apart. But here's what the Buddhist masters understood that changes everything about family love. What the Buddhist masters understood that changes everything about family love is this: the deepest suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what happens to us. And in families, most of our suffering comes from trying to control what we were never meant to control, other people's journeys. They discovered something revolutionary. You can love someone completely and still let them experience their own life. You can care deeply and still allow people to make their own mistakes. You can be supportive and still trust others to find their own strength. This isn't abandonment, it's liberation. It's what they called detached love, love that's free from the need to possess, manage, or control. But here's the beautiful part. When you love this way, you don't love less. You love more. Because detached love isn't cold or distant. It's the most generous form of love there is. It says, I love you enough to trust you with your own life. Can you imagine what your family relationships would feel like if everyone trusted each other this much? Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds beautiful, but how do I actually do this? How do I stop worrying about my family? How do I stop trying to help when I see them struggling? How do I love without controlling? The answer isn't to stop caring, it's to care differently. And the Buddhist path gives us 3 foundation practices that can transform how we show up in our families. Let me tell you about David. David had been the family problem solver for as long as he could remember. Whenever his sister called crying about her marriage, David immediately went into fix-it mode. He'd give advice, make phone calls, sometimes even drive across town to help sort things out. He thought he was being a good brother. But one day, David tried something different. When his sister called crying, instead of immediately jumping into solution mode, he took a breath and simply listened. He noticed his urge to fix, his discomfort with her pain, his need to make her feel better right away. But instead of acting on these impulses, he just watched them. And something amazing happened. His sister, instead of looking to him for answers, started finding her own solutions. She talked through her feelings, came to her own insights, and by the end of the conversation, she felt stronger, not because David had fixed anything, but because she had processed everything herself while feeling truly heard. This is mindful family awareness, the practice of watching your own reactions to your family's struggles without immediately acting on them. It's like becoming an observer of your own love. You notice when you're loving from anxiety, I have to fix this. When you're loving from control, I know what's best. And when you're loving from genuine care, I trust you to handle this. Try this right now. Think of a family member who's going through something difficult. Notice what immediately comes up for you. The urge to advise? To rescue? To worry? Just notice it without judging it. The practice is simple but profound. Before you react to any family situation, take 3 conscious breaths and ask yourself, am I about to act from love or from fear? Am I about to support their growth or prevent their growth? Jennifer discovered this practice by accident. She was having dinner with her adult son Marcus, who was telling her about his struggles at work. Jennifer's usual pattern was to immediately offer suggestions. Have you tried talking to your boss? Maybe you should update your resume. What about that networking event I told you about? But this particular evening, Jennifer was exhausted. So instead of launching into advice mode, she just paused. She looked at Marcus and said, "That sounds really hard, honey." And then she waited. In that pause, something shifted. Marcus kept talking, but now he was thinking out loud instead of just venting. He started connecting dots, seeing patterns, coming up with his own ideas. By the end of dinner, he had outlined a plan for handling his work situation, a plan that Jennifer never would have suggested, but that was perfectly suited to who Marcus was. That pause taught Jennifer something revolutionary. The space between someone sharing a problem and you offering a solution is sacred space. It's where the other person's wisdom lives. It's where their strength grows. It's where real solutions emerge, not your solutions imposed on their situation, but their solutions growing from their own understanding. Have you ever noticed how different it feels when someone truly listens to you versus when someone immediately tries to fix you? The sacred pause practice is this. When someone in your family shares a struggle, resist the urge to immediately respond. Instead, take a breath and create space for them to go deeper. Ask questions that help them explore their own thinking. What feels most difficult about this? What do you think might help? How do you want to handle this? This isn't neglect, it's the highest form of care. You're caring enough to believe they have their own answers. You're loving them enough to let them find their own strength. This might be the hardest practice for loving families because it requires saying no to people you care about, not from selfishness, but from wisdom. Lisa learned this when her daughter Emma, now 28, called for the third time that week asking for money. Lisa had always helped. "It's just temporary," Emma would say, and Lisa believed her. But after 5 years of temporary help, Emma was no more financially stable than before, and Lisa was depleting her retirement savings. The old Lisa would have felt guilty and sent the money. But the new Lisa, practicing compassionate boundaries, said something revolutionary. "Emma, I love you, and that's exactly why I'm not going to keep enabling this pattern. I believe you're capable of figuring this out, and I'm going to show that belief by trusting you to handle it." Emma was angry. She accused Lisa of not caring, of abandoning her when she needed help most. But Lisa held the boundary with love. 6 months later, Emma had gotten a better job and learned to budget. A year later, she thanked her mother for believing in her enough to let her struggle. Where in your family might your helping actually be preventing someone from growing? Compassionate boundaries aren't walls, they're gardens. They create the conditions where healthy relationships can grow. They say, "I love you enough to let you be responsible for your own life, and I respect myself enough to be responsible for mine." The practice is learning to distinguish between supporting someone and enabling someone. Support helps people grow stronger. Enabling helps people stay dependent. Support trusts people's capability. Enabling assumes people are incapable. These 3 foundation practices, mindful family awareness, the sacred pause, and compassionate boundaries, create the groundwork for everything that follows. They teach you how to love without clinging, how to care without controlling, how to be present without being invasive. But mastering these practices is just the beginning. Because what happens next will completely transform not just how you relate to your family, but how your entire family system begins to heal. What happens next will completely transform your understanding of family healing, because here's the breakthrough that changes everything. When one person in a family system truly awakens to these practices, it creates a ripple effect that heals both backwards and forwards through the generations. I know this sounds impossible. How can your individual awakening affect your grandmother who passed away years ago? How can it influence grandchildren who aren't even born yet? But this is where Buddhist wisdom reveals something profound about the nature of family consciousness, something that quantum physics is just beginning to understand. Let me tell you about Robert's breakthrough, because it perfectly illustrates how this works. Robert was 45, trapped in the family role of the responsible one. His aging father called him constantly with complaints about neighbors, doctors, and the world in general. His adult siblings dumped their problems on him, expecting him to fix everything. His own teenage children had learned to come to him for every decision, no matter how small. Robert was exhausted, resentful, and felt like he was drowning in everyone else's needs. After practicing mindful awareness for several months, Robert made a radical decision. The next time his father called to complain about the neighbors, instead of offering solutions or getting drawn into the drama, Robert said, "Dad, that sounds frustrating. I trust you'll figure out how to handle it." And then, this was the breakthrough moment. He stayed present and loving without taking on his father's emotional burden. Something extraordinary happened. His father, instead of escalating the complaints, paused. For the first time in years, he had to sit with his own feelings instead of passing them to Robert. And in that sitting, something shifted. His father started problem solving on his own, started taking responsibility for his own emotional state. Can you imagine the relief Robert felt? But here's what's even more amazing. The changes didn't stop there. Within weeks, Robert noticed his siblings were calling him less frequently with their crises. Not because he had told them to stop, but because the family dynamic had shifted. Robert was no longer available as the family dumping ground, so everyone else had to step up and handle their own lives. But the most profound change happened with Robert's teenage children. Because Robert was no longer exhausted from managing everyone else's problems, he had more genuine energy for his kids. And because he stopped trying to solve their every problem, they started developing their own problem-solving skills. His daughter, who had always been dependent and anxious, started showing confidence and independence. His son, who had always looked to others for guidance, started trusting his own judgment. This is the Buddhist insight that will blow your mind. Families are interconnected energy systems. When one person changes how they participate in the system, everyone else has to adjust. It's like moving one part of a mobile. Everything else shifts to find a new balance. But Robert's breakthrough went even deeper than this. As he practiced detached love with his living family members, he found himself thinking differently about his deceased mother. Instead of carrying guilt about things he should have said or done differently, he felt a sense of peace and completion with her memory. The healing rippled backwards through time. And when Robert's first grandchild was born 2 years later, that baby entered a completely different family system than the one Robert had grown up in. The anxiety, the codependency, the emotional overwhelm that had been passed down for generations, it stopped with Robert. The healing rippled forward through time. This is the moment everything clicks. Can you feel how your healing could transform your entire family line? This brings us to the 4 liberating insights that make this transformation possible. The first insight is that family roles are not permanent identities. They're temporary costumes we've been wearing so long we forgot we could take them off. Sarah had been the family peacekeeper since childhood. Whenever her parents fought, little Sarah would run between them, trying to make everyone feel better. As an adult, she automatically smoothed over every family conflict, managed everyone's emotions, and exhausted herself keeping the peace. The breakthrough came when Sarah realized being the peacekeeper wasn't who she was. It was just a role she had learned to play. And like any role, she could choose to stop playing it. The practice became learning to say, "I'm stepping out of my old role as family emotional manager. I trust that everyone can handle their own feelings, and everyone can work out their own conflicts." At first, her family panicked. But gradually, they learned to communicate directly with each other instead of going through Sarah. Conflicts got resolved more authentically because people had to face them directly. The second insight is that you are not just your family role. You're not the responsible one or the problem child or the successful one or the disappointment. These are labels that were placed on you, often when you were too young to question them. Michael had been labeled the artistic one in his family, which sounded positive, but actually meant impractical, unreliable, not to be trusted with important matters. His family loved his creativity but never took him seriously. Even as a successful graphic designer in his 30s, his family still treated him like a flaky dreamer. The breakthrough happened when Michael realized he could honor his creativity while also demonstrating reliability. He started showing up differently, following through on commitments, contributing to family planning, sharing his business successes. Gradually, his family began seeing him as a complete person rather than just the artistic one. Which family label have you been carrying that might be limiting how you show up? The third insight distinguishes between healthy connection and unhealthy entanglement. Interdependence means we're connected and we each take responsibility for our own part. Codependence means we're so tangled up we can't tell where one person ends and another begins. Linda discovered this difference when her adult daughter Amy was going through a divorce. Linda's first instinct was to take on Amy's pain, offer her home, manage Amy's emotions, and basically live Amy's divorce alongside her. But Linda caught herself and chose interdependence instead. She said, "Amy, I love you, and I'm here to support you. I believe you're strong enough to get through this. What do you need from me?" Instead of taking over, Linda provided emotional support while letting Amy maintain ownership of her own life. Amy not only got through the divorce more successfully, she grew stronger and more confident in the process. The fourth insight is about finding the balance between involvement and detachment, what Buddhists call the middle way. You don't have to choose between caring too much or not caring at all. There's a third option, caring deeply while holding lightly. Tom learned this with his son Jake, who was struggling with addiction. Tom's old pattern was either complete enablement, "I'll fix this for you," or complete cutoff, I'm done with you. Both extremes came from the same place, Tom's inability to tolerate his son's pain. The middle way meant Tom could say, "Jake, I love you completely. I believe in your ability to overcome this. I'm here to support your recovery, but I won't support your addiction. I'll be present for your healing journey without trying to control it." This created space for Jake to take responsibility for his own recovery, while still feeling his father's love and support. It allowed Tom to care without being consumed, to help without enabling, to love without drowning. Where in your family relationships might you need to find this middle way? Here's what's revolutionary about these 4 insights. They don't require anyone else in your family to change first. You can begin practicing them immediately, regardless of how your family responds. And as you practice them, you create new energy in the family system that naturally invites others to show up differently. But here's the part that will transform how you think about family healing forever. These insights don't just change your current relationships, they heal your family line both backwards and forwards through what Buddhists call merit dedication. When you break a pattern of suffering in your own life, you honor everyone in your lineage who carried that pattern before you. You complete their incomplete healing. And you ensure that future generations won't have to carry what you've finally learned to put down. This is how one person's awakening can heal 3 generations. This is how individual transformation becomes family transformation. This is how you become not just someone who breaks free from family patterns, but someone who liberates your entire lineage. This is how one person's awakening can heal 3 generations, through the recognition that family healing isn't just about fixing current relationships, but about completing the unfinished business of the past and clearing the path for the future. Let me show you exactly how this works through the story of Patricia's extraordinary transformation. Patricia came from a long line of women who didn't know how to receive love. Her grandmother Rose had been raised by parents who showed affection through criticism. "I'm only telling you this because I love you," was the family motto. Rose passed this to Patricia's mother Jean, who loved through worry and control. Jean passed it to Patricia, who became a perfectionist people pleaser, constantly exhausting herself trying to earn love she already had. The pattern might have continued to Patricia's daughter Emma, except Patricia made a radical decision. She began practicing the Buddhist path we've been exploring. She learned to receive compliments without deflecting them. She learned to let people help her without feeling guilty. She learned to believe she was worthy of love exactly as she was. Can you imagine how foreign this felt to Patricia at first? Like learning to breathe underwater? But here's where the magic happened. As Patricia healed her relationship with receiving love, she found herself thinking about her grandmother Rose with deep compassion instead of judgment. She realized that Rose's criticism came from her own unhealed wounds, her own inability to receive love. Patricia began sending loving thoughts to Rose's memory, honoring her grandmother's struggles while refusing to carry them forward. This is what Buddhists call healing backward, when your individual healing completes the incomplete healing of previous generations. Patricia couldn't change what happened to Rose, but she could heal Rose's legacy by breaking the pattern Rose had been unable to break. And the healing forward? Emma, now 22, grew up watching her mother learn to receive love gracefully. Emma never learned that she had to earn affection through performance. She never learned that criticism was a form of love. She learned to expect kindness, to receive compliments naturally, to believe in her own worthiness. The pattern that had been passed down for at least 3 generations stopped with Patricia. But Patricia's healing went even deeper than this. She began what I call ancestral gratitude practice, consciously thanking her lineage for their gifts while consciously releasing their burdens. Take a moment here. Think about your own family line. What gifts did previous generations give you? What burdens are you ready to put down? Every evening, Patricia would spend 5 minutes in contemplation. Thank you, Grandma Rose, for your strength and resilience. Thank you for surviving so that I could be here. I honor your struggle, and I release the pattern of earning love through perfection. Thank you, Mom, for your fierce protection and dedication. I honor your love, and I release the pattern of showing love through worry. I am healing what you couldn't heal, and I do it with love for all of us. This wasn't just psychological exercise. Patricia could feel the healing moving through her family system. Her relationship with her aging mother improved dramatically as Patricia stopped trying to manage her mother's emotions. Her relationship with Emma deepened as Patricia learned to trust her daughter's own wisdom. Even Emma's future relationships were being blessed by the healing happening now. The daily practice of generational healing. This kind of healing doesn't happen in one breakthrough moment. It happens through daily practice, through consistently choosing to show up differently in your family system. Let me share the 3 practices that create lasting transformation. Morning intention setting. Every morning, before you interact with any family member, take 2 minutes to set an intention for how you want to show up. Not how you want them to be, but how you want to be. David, the former family problem solver we met earlier, developed this morning practice. Today I choose to love without controlling. Today I choose to listen without fixing. Today I choose to trust others with their own lives. Today I choose to break the pattern of anxious love that has run in my family. This simple practice transformed his entire day. Instead of reactively falling into old patterns, he consciously chose new ones. Instead of his family interactions draining him, they began energizing him because he was finally showing up as his authentic self. What intention would transform your family interactions if you set it every morning? Evening reflection practice. Each evening, Patricia would review her day and ask herself 3 questions. Where did I love with attachment today? And where did I love with freedom? Where did I fall into old family patterns? And where did I create new ones? What am I grateful for in my family today? And what am I ready to release? This wasn't about judging herself. It was about conscious learning, about gradually increasing her awareness of how she participated in family dynamics. Over time, she could catch herself falling into old patterns faster and faster, until she could shift in the moment instead of realizing afterward. The family blessing practice. Perhaps most powerfully, Patricia developed a practice of sending loving wishes to every member of her family, past, present, and future. Before bed, she would envision each person and offer them this blessing. May you be free from the suffering that has been passed down through our lineage. May you know your own strength and wisdom. May you love and be loved without conditions. May you break any remaining patterns that no longer serve. May you pass on only healing to the next generation. She would include family members who had died, family members she was currently in conflict with, and even family members not yet born. This practice helped her remember that everyone in her family was doing their best with the tools they had inherited, and that her healing was a gift to all of them. Who in your family, living or deceased, most needs your forgiveness and blessing right now? The ripple effect in action. The most beautiful part of Patricia's story is how her individual healing created changes she never could have orchestrated directly. Her sister Karen, who lived across the country and had minimal contact with Patricia, started calling more often. Without knowing why, Karen felt drawn to reconnect with family. Their conversations became deeper, more authentic. Patricia's nephew, Karen's son, who had been struggling with anxiety and perfectionism, began to relax. Something in the family energy had shifted, creating more space for him to be himself. He started pursuing music, which he had always loved but never felt practical enough to explore. Even Patricia's father, who had always been emotionally distant, began opening up more. The family gatherings that had once felt tense and performative became genuinely enjoyable. People started sharing real feelings instead of just updating each other on achievements. This is the profound truth about family systems. They're like spider webs. Touch one strand, and the whole web vibrates. When you heal your own patterns with consciousness and intention, you send new energy through the entire system. You give everyone permission to show up differently, even if they don't consciously understand what's changed. Creating new family traditions. Patricia's final step was creating new traditions that supported the healed patterns instead of the old wounded ones. Instead of family gatherings focused on achievement updates and comparison, Patricia introduced gratitude circles, where each person shared something they appreciated about their own growth and something they appreciated about each family member. Instead of gift-giving focused on impressing each other, they started giving experience gifts, tickets to concerts, hiking trips, cooking classes, things that created connection rather than competition. Instead of family photos where everyone had to look perfect, they started taking real-life photos, pictures of people laughing, being silly, showing genuine emotion. These new traditions supported the new energy Patricia had created through her healing. They reinforced the message that this family valued authenticity over performance, connection over achievement, being overdoing. What new tradition could your family create that would support healing rather than old patterns? The most profound realization for Patricia came 2 years into this journey, when she understood that her healing wasn't just about her family, it was her contribution to healing the world. Every family that breaks cycles of suffering makes it easier for other families to break cycles of suffering. Every person who learns to love without clinging gives others permission to love without clinging. This is how individual awakening becomes collective healing. This is how family transformation becomes societal transformation. This is how you become not just someone who heals your own wounds, but someone who helps heal the wounds of the world. And so we've completed a profound journey together. In these past 60 minutes, you haven't just listened to family healing, you've experienced it. You've seen the invisible patterns that have governed your family for generations. You've understood how love can become a prison when we love from fear instead of freedom. And most importantly, you've learned the path to love your family in a liberating way, not less, but more, deeper, more authentically. Now the most important part begins, bringing these insights into your daily life. Remember that healing doesn't happen in one moment, but in thousands of small moments. Each time you choose to listen instead of fix. Each time you choose to trust instead of control. Each time you choose to love from freedom instead of clinging. Start with the small things. Tomorrow morning, before you interact with any family member, take 2 minutes to set an intention for how you want to show love. Tonight, before you sleep, send blessings to each person in your family, both the living and those who have passed. And in difficult moments, remember that you could be the first person in your lineage to break these invisible chains. If today's journey has touched your heart, I invite you to become part of the Where Hearts Rest community, where souls like yours find rest and healing. Please subscribe so you won't miss other deep contemplative journeys about family and love. If you feel grateful for what we've shared, a small like will help others find this path too. And if you have stories, insights, or questions you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments. Each story you share could be the light that helps someone else on their healing journey. Finally, let me offer you a blessing in the Buddhist tradition. May you and your family find peace in letting go. May you love without clinging, care without controlling. May you become the bridge of healing between your lineage's past and future. And may your love become a source of freedom, not burden, for all those you cherish. Until we meet again in this sacred space, walk gently on your path of healing,